Good day. This is the Corrupt True Crime Podcast, and I'm Charlie Cruz. Today's episode is about how Bernie Madoff's $65 billion Ponzi scheme exposed the mathematical illusions propping up Wall Street's most trusted institutions. The 17 employees working on the 17th floor of Manhattan's Lipstick Building thought they were processing legitimate investment trades. They weren't. They were generating completely fictitious account statements for tens of thousands of clients who believed their money was safely invested in stocks and bonds. It wasn't. Every dollar sat in a single Chase Manhattan bank account, funding one of the most audacious financial frauds in history. For nearly 2 decades, a respected Wall Street legend, a former chairman of NASDAQ itself, orchestrated a Ponzi scheme so massive it would eventually claim $65 billion in phantom wealth. And the beautiful part? The scheme was brilliantly simple. Bernie Madoff didn't start as a criminal mastermind. He built his reputation the old-fashioned way, through decades of legitimate success. Founded his securities firm with $5,000, saved from summer jobs and money borrowed from his in-laws. Pioneered computerized trading systems. Helped create NASDAQ. Served as its chairman. The man was Wall Street royalty, an elder statesman who sat on regulatory boards and advised on the very rules meant to prevent fraud. His broker-dealer operation handled up to 5% of New York Stock Exchange trading volume. Philanthropist, community leader, trusted advisor to charities and foundations. By the time he started running his investment advisory scheme, he'd built decades of credibility that money simply cannot buy. Here's what made Madoff different from your typical Ponzi scheme operator. Most fraudsters promise the moon, 30 or 40% returns, get greedy, collapse quickly. Madoff promised 10 to 12% annually. Modest, believable, exactly what wealthy investors expect from solid money management. Even more clever, his returns were remarkably consistent. Positive returns 96% of months over nearly 2 decades. Markets up, Madoff made money. Markets down, Madoff still made money. Never spectacular gains, never catastrophic losses, just steady, reliable growth. The kind of performance that makes investors sleep soundly at night. He claimed to use something called a split-strike conversion strategy. Technical enough to sound sophisticated, vague enough to discourage questions. Purchase blue-chip stocks, sell call options to generate income, buy put options for downside protection. Rotate in and out of cash based on market conditions. On paper, it sounded perfectly reasonable. In reality, it was complete fiction. Madoff never bought a single share of stock, never traded a single option. Every trade confirmation, every account statement, every regulatory filing was fabricated by computer programs specifically designed to generate fake documentation. The operation itself was beautifully compartmentalized. The legitimate broker-dealer business occupied the 18th and 19th floors of the Lipstick Building. His 2 sons worked there, handling real trades for real clients, making real money. That business was profitable, regulated, inspected regularly. Everything appeared above board. Meanwhile, down on the 17th floor, in offices employees called the North Pole, because access was so restricted, the fraudulent investment advisory operation hummed along. Frank de Pascali, Madoff's right-hand man for 33 years, controlled entry to that floor. Computer programmers Jerome O'Hara and George Perez built sophisticated software to generate thousands of fake trade confirmations. Account managers like Annette Bongiorno and Joanne Krupi sent statements to clients showing steady gains on investments that didn't exist. The mechanics were textbook Ponzi. Client deposits went straight into Chase account number 703. When investors wanted to withdraw money, Madoff paid them from that same account using deposits from other investors. The brilliant part was that most clients never withdrew. They watched their statements show compounding gains year after year and left everything invested. Some accounts supposedly grew for decades, accumulating phantom profits that existed only on paper. More after our break.
My name is Tom Sachs. I'm an artist in New York City. For nearly 2 decades, I have been collaborating with Nike.
Nike running is for runners, Nike basketball is for basketball. Nike craft is for everyone else.
Madoff used feeder funds, intermediaries who pooled money from multiple investors, adding layers of separation and making due diligence someone else's problem. He created artificial scarcity, made wealthy people beg to invest rather than soliciting them. Had to know someone to get in. Had to have connections. Classic con artist technique, making the mark feel privileged to hand over their money. And here's the thing about Madoff's fraud that should terrify anyone who trusts the financial system. The red flags were everywhere. Financial analysts tried to replicate his split-strike conversion strategy and couldn't. The options markets weren't liquid enough to support the trading volume he claimed. His returns showed virtually no correlation with actual market movements, statistically impossible for someone supposedly holding stocks. His auditor was a 3-person accounting firm operating from a strip mall, when industry standard for managing billions would be a major firm like Deloitte or PricewaterhouseCoopers. He claimed to hold client assets himself rather than using an independent custodian, creating obvious opportunity for fraud. Some of his trade confirmations showed transactions on dates when markets were closed, holidays and weekends, proof the documents were fabricated. But the most damning evidence came from a financial analyst named Harry Markopoulos. This man spent 4 minutes examining Madoff's return stream and determined it was mathematically impossible. 4 minutes. He created detailed reports with charts, graphs, statistical analyses proving the fraud. Starting in the early 2000s, he submitted complaint after complaint to the Securities and Exchange Commission. His most comprehensive submission was a 21-page report titled, "The World's Largest Hedge Fund is a Fraud." He laid out specific investigative steps the SEC could take to prove it. He practically drew them a map to the crime scene. The SEC conducted 6 separate examinations of Madoff between the early 90s and the collapse. 6 times they had him in their sights. 6 times they walked away finding nothing. Examiners interviewed Madoff, requested documentation, accepted his explanations at face value, never independently verified trades with counterparties, never checked with the depository trust company to confirm securities holdings, never inspected the 17th floor operations, never questioned why a firm supposedly managing $65 billion used a strip mall accountant. The agency was deferential to his reputation, former NASDAQ chairman, industry legend. They went through procedural motions without critical thinking, settled for surface-level compliance checks rather than digging deeper. For years, the scheme worked beautifully. Bull markets meant modest redemption requests. New money flowed in steadily through feeder funds. Madoff lived well, but not absurdly. Multiple homes, a yacht, luxury items, but nothing that screamed fraud. His lifestyle could be explained by his legitimate business success. He gave millions to charity, using philanthropy as both marketing and credibility enhancement. The whole operation hummed along like a well-oiled machine, generating fake statements, shuffling money between accounts, paying returns with other people's deposits. Then came the financial crisis. When Lehman Brothers collapsed, panic swept through markets. Investors everywhere started pulling money from risky investments, seeking safety in cash and government bonds. Redemption requests to Madoff accelerated dramatically. Billions needed to go out the door. The problem with any Ponzi scheme is mathematical inevitability. Eventually, more money goes out than comes in. New deposits can't cover redemptions, plus the fictional returns being credited to accounts. The numbers stop working. By late autumn, Madoff was scrambling to meet requests totaling billions of dollars. The account that had funded everything for nearly 2 decades was running dry. More after our break. In early December, Bernie Madoff called his sons Mark and Andrew into his apartment. These were his boys, worked in the family business their entire careers, thought they were part of a legitimate operation. He told them the investment advisory business was a giant Ponzi scheme, that he was finished, that everything was a lie. The sons were devastated. The next day, they contacted a lawyer. The day after that, they went to federal authorities. Within hours, FBI agents arrived at Madoff's Manhattan penthouse. When they asked if there was an innocent explanation for what his sons reported, Madoff replied there was no innocent explanation. He told the agents he paid investors with money that wasn't there, that he was broke, that it was all one big lie. The whole house of cards had collapsed. The aftermath was devastating. $65 billion in supposed account balances evaporated. Actual cash losses ran between $18 and $20 billion after accounting for fictitious gains. Victims included sophisticated hedge fund managers, international banks, charities, foundations, universities, pension funds. Some had invested everything. French aristocrat René Thierry Magon de la Ville-Huchet lost $1.4 billion and took his own life. Madoff's own son Mark took his own life exactly 2 years after his father's arrest. Entire charities shut down. Families lost their life savings. Retirees discovered their nest eggs never existed. Bernie Madoff pleaded guilty to 11 federal felonies, didn't even attempt a defense. The judge sentenced him to 150 years in federal prison, the maximum possible. Peter Madoff, Bernie's brother and chief compliance officer, got 10 years for falsifying records. Frank DePasquale pleaded guilty to 10 counts, but died before sentencing. The computer programmers, the account managers, the key players in the 17th floor operation all faced justice. Some cooperated, some fought, or went to prison or faced serious consequences. The court-appointed trustee, Irving Picard, began the monumental task of recovering assets. He went after everyone who withdrew more money than they invested, even if they had no idea they were participating in fraud. If you took out $7 million but only put in $5 million, you owed $2 million back. The logic was brutal but fair. Those phantom gains came from other victims' deposits. Picard recovered approximately $14 billion, an impressive amount but still leaving billions in real losses. Jeffrey Pikawa's estate alone settled for $7.2 billion, the single largest forfeiture in American history.
Building a new product? Temez Labs takes you from napkin sketch to the App Store. Trusted by Fortune 500s for quality, security, and speed. Book your free strategy session at temez.ai.
Bernie Madoff spent his remaining years in federal prison in North Carolina. Never showed much remorse, blamed the victims for being greedy, claimed everyone knew something was wrong, but kept investing anyway. He died in prison about 3 years ago, at age 82, having served less than 12 years of his sentence. His wife Ruth claimed complete ignorance despite working as company bookkeeper, though she withdrew $15 million in the period before collapse. She surrendered virtually everything and lives quietly, shunned by the community that once embraced them. The Madoff scandal triggered massive regulatory reforms. The SEC overhauled its examination procedures, increased scrutiny of investment advisors, improved whistleblower protections. The agency's failure became a case study in regulatory capture and institutional complacency. But no amount of reform brings back the money, restores the shattered trust, or rebuilds the destroyed charities. What makes this case so fascinating isn't the complexity, it's the simplicity wrapped in sophistication. At its core, Madoff's fraud was kindergarten-level crime, taking new money to pay old investors while keeping fake records. But he wrapped that simple con in layers of credibility, reputation, exclusivity, and just enough technical jargon to make people stop asking questions. He proved that the best disguise for a fraud isn't complexity, it's respectability. That a sterling reputation can be worth more than any security system. That people see what they want to see, especially when steady returns keep appearing on their statements. $65 billion in lies, built over 2 decades by a man who could have retired wealthy from his legitimate business alone. Instead, he chose greed, chose fraud, chose to betray everyone who trusted him. The scheme was audacious in its scale and duration, but ultimately just another con that couldn't beat mathematics. In the end, Bernie Madoff proved what every Ponzi scheme eventually proves. You can fool sophisticated investors, you can evade regulators, you can maintain the lie for years, but you cannot defeat arithmetic. And when the numbers finally come due, the house always collapses. The thing about brilliant schemes is that they always end with handcuffs and bars, because no matter how clever you think you are, the house always wins. Now, if you enjoyed our show, tap that follow button and 5 stars in our ratings. Catch you next time.
Grab news. Tamez.